Look, I don't know. I mean, I guess there's no reason why someone couldn't use their AI, but I think if you're going to be here, be here. You know what I mean? Like, but maybe it is just something from Teams. I don't know for sure. Okay, let's get to sharing. So give me a minute. I hit record, Chris. Did you see that? Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, and is everyone seeing my screen? All right, wonderful. Thank you all for joining. Those of you that have been on before had kind of heard this spiel. I'm going to give it again, and it's going to be quick. These sessions are recorded and transcribed. We use them in our marketing, so you may see your face on LinkedIn. I thank you for your willingness to do that. We like to see your face, so if you're on, please do be on, as our format is interactive. It's mostly interactive, and so our speakers, John Forsberg is our speaker today, they like to see your face so that they can do that interaction. So please do, and it looks like everybody does have their camera on. Use the chat for conversation if you're in between things, or if you've got openings. Actually have, I should be getting some openings that I might post within our group soon, and I'll I think sharing that kind of stuff is helpful to the group, so please do. Yeah, Chris, what's up? Oh, didn't mean to. All right, all good. So last month I didn't have the speaker's name on. This month I've spelled it incorrectly. I apologize, John. Let's fix that. There we go. So I'll do an introduction as I always do, and then we're going to hand it over to John, and then we'll jump into discussion. So you have joined CI Mastermind Live. We meet monthly. We are 5 to 20 people. I would say, it's interesting. I think, gosh, we've had probably well over 200 that have signed up now, because we've been doing this for a couple years. Our groups are usually, I guess, how many do we have on here? 7, 8. Last month was 17 people. So I think we're getting pretty nice attendance. We do brief learning on a topic, and then we try and solve real-time problems. I like when you guys bring, like, hey, this is what's going on, and the speaker can give you some ideas on what to do about that. And it's a rotational, so we try and give people opportunities to talk. It's kind of hard. It's 45 minutes, so not everybody gets a chance. I always ask, respect your peers, don't share information that shouldn't be public, and be helpful. Be helpful to each other. And if you'd like, in the chat, it'd be great if you'd say, here's where I work, here's what I do, and if there's anything else you'd like to add to it, that is great, just so everybody knows who is on the call. But I don't like to take time with introductions. All right, so like I mentioned, we've been getting some pretty nice engagement in this. We had 35 registrations last month. I want to say we had 22 this month. So that's, and it bounces around, right? We all understand statistical variation. It goes up and down. And so we're getting a consistent 10 to 15 people on the session. We will do this next year, so hopefully you're looking forward to seeing more. And I've already started reaching out to speakers, so we'll have the first 6 months of our discussions up on the website, probably not till mid-December. And I have to make sure I confirm those speakers, but I think I already have 3 of the 6 confirmed. Although one of them's me, so that was kind of easy. So I think the dialogue is great. I'm getting a lot of good feedback. There's someone who he hasn't been able to attend some. It doesn't look like he's on, but he sent me a note and just said how much he's enjoyed these and how he feels like we get some really good depth in our dialogue. So I'm going to keep pushing that. I think depth is what we're all looking for. Thank you for the thank you for the feedback over the last year on offerings and other programming, and I'm going to continue to use that, right? So that's part of the value add to me, other than meeting all of you, is also as I present some of our programming to you and you guys say, hey, this is a good idea, or hey, you should try this, or whatever, that's helpful feedback as I kind of try and produce the right things that are really needed in the marketplace. So that's my big thank you to everyone. The next session, so we skipped December. The next session will be in January 29th. I'm going to run it. And actually, just let me ask a question. So I'm going to run it. It's going to be, I'd like to talk a little bit about our work with Leader Standard work over the past year, what has gone well, areas that I do see clients struggle and we struggle to help clients. And so I want to have some discussion on that, as well as show you some upgrades we made to the tool. I also think since it's January, it's a good opportunity for us to do some goal setting. I feel like there's enough of you that do attend pretty darn regular that we could use this as a bit of an accountability group, set some goals and check on them. And I guess what I'd like to know first is maybe just by a show of hands, would you find that valuable? So raise your hand if some goal setting in this group as an accountability group would be valuable. I'm going to say at least, okay, more than half. So most of the group. Okay, fantastic. And when we do it, I'll think a little bit about maybe thank you, Robert. I'll think about maybe constraining it. I'm sure you're doing goal setting within your own company. So this may be more on the personal development side or maybe education side. So I'll kind of think to maybe have our own twist on it. When I do it, what's a good time frame for our goals? 3 months or 6 months? And you can just yell it out what you think. 3 months or 6 months? Chris says 3.
3 be good.
3 is good. Any other votes? Okay. Okay, cool.
I need to understand what you want to achieve. Then I understand if the goal needs to be long-term or short-term.
So if I'm put on the spot right now, I might say one goal might be I'm going to read 3 books on continuous improvement. That might be a goal that you set, and then we come back and check on that. I don't know, maybe it probably takes me 3 months to read 3 books, or 6 months to read 3 books, if I'm just being blatantly honest. Nonetheless, it's a good goal. Reading is crucial.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So yes. So I'm going to give some updates on our program, some things where we've seen success, updates on CI Mastermind platform as well, and we'll do some goal setting in January. Okay. That is me. Now I'm going to hand it over to John. John, can you do a little bit of an introduction and then jump into your topic?
Okay. All right. Well, I'm been retired since 2017. So, but I started working in 1973. I have a degree in electrical engineering. I worked for Shure Brothers at the time, who makes audio products. And in 1981 or 2, I went to Motorola, and I started as a senior quality engineer, ended up as quality manager of a division. So Motorola was really a bunch of medium-sized companies lumped together who all kind of did their own thing. We manufactured electronic products, and it was part of the communications sector, which is still around as Motorola Solutions, who make two-way radios, mobile radios, video equipment, but at that time it was very radio heavy. Around 1984, I met Bill Smith. Bill Smith was a quality manager of the division that made the base stations for all of the radio, and he started investigating not quality but reliability. He was on a warranty project, and we were finding that radios in the field were failing with latent defects. So a latent defect is a under-torqued or over-torqued screw, or a wrong resistor value that heats up and fails over time with heat and humidity, or solder connections that aren't 100%, they're 50 or 60%, and with vibration and shock, they fail. And he started looking at early life reliability. So he was very concerned about that, and he came down to say they're directly correlated to defects in the manufacturing site. So what are their placing components, soldering components, assembling that circuit board into a chassis, and all the electromechanical connections, those latent defects were failing, and we were finding them in the factory as well as in the field. So he had a relationship with Matsushita. He went to their Japanese manufacturing plant in Franklin Park. At that time, Matsushita was Panasonic Technics, the audio amplifiers, and their products in complexity were very similar to our radios. And he was using defects per unit as a measure because yield, the definition of yield varies by company, but he was looking at rolled yield. In a given time interval, if we make 100 units, how many defects are found? And if you divide defects by units, you get a defects per unit, and you can use e to the minus DPU to estimate yield. Well, he found that the Japanese were running 1/10 of a defect per unit or less, where our factories were running anywhere from 1/2 to 2 or 3 defects per unit. When you do the math with e to the minus DPU, their yields were in the 90%, and ours were e to the minus 1 is 30-some%. It's a third. That means 2/3 of our units were requiring some repair or replacement and a retest before we could ship the product. And when he asked them what they were doing, they said, our goal is to keep our critical parameters on target and minimize variation. And they didn't always use the word CP or CPK, but they looked to have the tolerance be robust enough that it was at least 1.5 to 2 times wider than what the process was running. And they had control charts on most of their critical parameters. So they were looking for assignable causes and fixing them as they came up. So in 1986 and 87, they started to talk about, we need our product designers to maximize tolerances and our process designers to minimize variation. So there was a lot of communication between the factories and the design and development engineering teams. They didn't even know what the typical variability was, for example, on a chip component or on some of the mechanical components we had. And we started supplying them with histograms, average and standard deviations, and they had to learn that. And so they started talking about, hey, we want to have the tolerances twice as big as the variability of the critical characteristic. So the word Six Sigma came up because rather than plus or minus 3 standard deviations where you have, that's great for one component, but these products had dozens or hundreds of components. So the yield, the rolled yield on a product with 500 components and 1,000 solder connections was really a problem. That's why they came up with defects per million opportunities, because yield was heavily dependent on complexity. You could have one factory making a circuit board with 50 components and another one making one with 500 components, and their defects per unit would be dramatically different, yet they were made on the same pick and place wave soldering lines. So when you convert it to opportunities, which at Motorola it was officially parts plus solder connections, you were able to scale things by complexity. And they suddenly started comparing the factory down in Florida versus the factory in Chicago versus the factories in Texas, and they found out some were significantly better. They started sharing best practices. So that defects per million opportunity is often criticized because when they try to put that in other non-design, non-product areas like a warehouse or a call center, what's the opportunity base? And it becomes a guessing game. And even though it's a relative scale, not an absolute scale, like a Richter scale or a Fujita scale on tornadoes, you could compare a product to product or a process to process. So in 1988, 89, they were having such good success in improving product quality and reducing those latent defects in the field. Our repair depots were seeing new products coming out with significantly less repairs and returns. And senior management said, well, hey, we should start integrating quality plans, roadmaps, into our business plans. So typical Motorola divisions had monthly or quarterly operations review. The finance guys would show sales, costs, profit. The marketing people would show all their promotions. They added a section in there for quality where we would come in and say, here's where our key process indicators are for the factory, for the warehouse. And the quality review and quality plans started getting integrated into the general business plan. So that happened in the 1988, 89. This was a big shift. And they said, why can't we make quality part of everyone's job? How do we get more people involved? And then what kind of education and training do we need to deploy? You know, you just can't run everybody through a 40-hour Greenbelt class. On the other hand, you need something to show the senior leaders, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, an hour or two. And then you need something for the frontline employee who can use it for more simpler things like safety, cleanliness, and later on 5 S's. So they started to deploy it, and guess what? The bell curve for a mechanical or electrical component doesn't directly apply in administrative areas. They have service levels or percentage of units shipped same day or those kinds of things. They don't have a tolerance, and they're really not normally distributed. They tend to shift and jump around. I ran a call center at Motorola for about 7 years, and there were constant assignable causes. 10 people called in sick. The order entry system is down. I mean, so they said, we need other tools and things for these administrative areas. And we need to tie the recognition to quality. So how do we tie all the different functions and organizations? When you get your performance review, what are the quality goals or quality objectives that we have? And who does the training and how much training? So they struggled with that, and there's some solutions for that. In 1990, Michael Harry got involved. He's often cited as the originator of Six Sigma. He did a lot of the training documents, but Bill Smith was really the main guy pushing it. And they started the Black Belt program in 90. They designed it, and the first class came out in 92. So they said every division in Motorola has to volunteer one expert, one engineer, one statistician to be the Black Belt, so to speak, who would be the person that would be the expert. And depending on how each division deployed their training, that would be the go-to person and the coach. They also started getting more interested in customer feedback. So customer surveys, complaint tracking, primary customers visits by VPs and senior leaders. There was a whole voice of the customer effort, including QFD, in that 92 to 94 timeframe. In 94, Michael Harry needed a organized way to do projects, and he came out with MAIC. And a year later, a couple companies said, well, how do you project management? We need a defined phase. And so the whole DMAIC process evolved and started in the 94, 95 timeframe. So the questions that came up are these projects out on the factory still useful 6 months after the design cycle? How can we really impact the design? The engineering teams are already working on the next product. How many engineering changes are they going to allow on a product that's a year old? So there was that question. Why are we focused on the factory? We need to go to administrative areas. And then a division with 300 or 400 people, how many projects are the right number of projects to have at one time? Should it be 1? Should it be 20? Should it be 15? And the whole question of how many meetings do you want on teams and projects at one time? And you're pulling them away from their existing job. What's their time commitment? Typical time commitment that I used was 4 hours a week for each team member. So 10% of their, quote, 40-hour week. Like I ever worked 40 hours, geez.
It was 30, right?
Some
Right, John?
Yes, and then they started talking about quality circles and Kaizen and incremental projects where it's not a 3 or 4 month, 90-day project. It's really a what can we do in 2 weeks to make things more effective. So you can see the lean tools and the lean ideas starting to creep in that mid 90s time frame, because some companies were talking about small incremental improvement constantly, where Six Sigma was about how do we take a previous design, redesign the process, and go from 1,000 defects a month to 100 defects a month, 10x improvement. And then how many teams should we have at one time? How do you manage the training and deployment? And how do you assure that each project is effective? So there was a lot of discussion about, well, we ought to know when to kill a project. If you're working on a project that's cost you $400,000 to implement to save $200,000, there became a focus on how do we know when to kill a project versus let it continue on. And then in 2000 and beyond, the term Six Sigma started to get lumped into a whole and quality improvement sciences. You hear about lean, you hear about theory of constraints, but really it's a design methodology where the engineering people and the factory people and your purchasing people are working together to assure that the rolled yield of that product or the defects per unit is significantly lower than the previous generation. It doesn't always apply in administrative areas. So a quality management system built around metrics and their improvement started to become a conversation. And of course, there was the Baldrige Award at that time. There's the ISO 9000. There's numerous standards out there for automotive, for aerospace, for medical and pharmaceutical that are built around the ISO 9000 and how to implement a quality system. And that's kind of where we are today. So all of those questions that we had in the 88 to 95 timeframe are the same questions that are on your sheet there.
And John, I just want to add a few
Yeah, go ahead.
Things there. So one, I met John earlier in my career when we were both, I think I was doing some broad-based Six Sigma, probably certifying belts. And I believe you were doing some work in the call center on improvements. And what I would like everyone to recognize is, John is one of those people that has a deep foundational understanding of Six Sigma that I don't see enough of, frankly, in the marketplace, workplace, and that it is a design system. So lean. So I always did feel lean was a good base. The concepts in lean is a good base to start with in any company. It's about standardization. It's about mobilizing, right? I think that's great. Where I often disagree with some of the lean folks is, okay, that's wonderful, but John's questions are really important as well, or at least as a next step as I move beyond lean. How many projects can I do? It's sometimes I think lean is presented as a fix everything method, and there's scarce resources. We have to decide where we put resources. Additionally, these things often are projects. The big things to go fix often are projects. They're not just some go do, snap your fingers, in 3 weeks we got something solved. We're designing a new process. We're designing the tolerance around a product or the capability of our process to be able to build around that tolerance. And we need to collect data. We need to study what kind of variation exists in our raw material inputs and our manufacturing processes, in the human component that's in most every process, even when we automate. We have to just understand those things and try and model them out so we can figure out what the optimum is. And I believe that I would like to see more of that, I guess, in the workplace. So that was I just want to highlight and emphasize a few things that I think John was saying there, because I think they're very important. And I hope that people recognize that Lean Six Sigma means lean for some things and Six Sigma for some things. They both bring their own unique value. John, you want to agree or disagree or add to any of that?
Yeah, and I was going to add a lot of criticism of the quote demonic flow is that it's a 3-month, 2-month, all kinds of work on the define phase. There's something that I would call a blitz demonic. You get a phone call, you're the quality engineer or a manufacturing engineer, line X is shut down. You don't have time for a charter. You got to go out there, have a technician troubleshoot 10 of the rejects, come out and tell you, hey, I got a Pareto here. 8 of the 10 are this capacitor here. Okay, we've got a defective component. Let's screen them. We'll put in the long-term solution later. It could be a supplier issue, or it could be too much preheat or too much temperature in the, it could be some other root cause, but you got to get out there and get the line back up in a half a day. So the DMAIC is spinning in your head. You're doing all of that. You're making notes, but you're not going in a meeting room and creating a charter. So I don't know if you'd call that a blitz or a rapid resolve, but the DMAIC is still the steps you're going through. And if you're a Deming fan, you're doing the plan, do, study, act rapidly in hours versus days or weeks. So
even if I do a Kaizen event, we're still doing demand. We're still doing, typically we're doing define and some of the measure outside of the Kaizen event, but we're doing some of the measure, analyze, improve. Like that is my go-to robust methodology for problem solving. Can I want to transition to try and create a little bit of conversation. Are you good, John, or is there anything else you wanted to add?
I'm done. I'm done unless someone has a question. We can save the questions on Six Sigma till later. Let everybody get on the other topics.
Okay. So I did something here, and it was slightly rushed, but hopefully this will be interesting. So John wanted to know from you guys what was, I think, the most important question for your organizations. And I know it's kind of small. I can see everyone squinting, but I'll read it so you can see. These were the responses of the folks that registered. And initially, I didn't really see a pattern, but it does look like the response or the question of, is performance improvement part of every employee's role, which that one doesn't surprise me that much. That came out the highest. That had six folks saying that was the biggest one. The next one was, do your metrics align across operational administration? That's one that maybe we should have a whole conversation next year on that topic. And I can actually see some smiles and some heads nodding. So are your quality goals embedded in your business strategy? I like that one as well. And are education, training, recognition systems supporting your shift? So that's just, I just want to share that. That's kind of how how your peers, I guess, on this call came back in terms of what is most important to them. And I would say no surprise, it is getting every employee involved. So I thought let's start there on some questions. And I was going to jump to I think Dan, because you're new, so why not start our discussion with you? And Dan, you responded, continuous improvement seems to be the mindset that is extra and outside of usual job responsibilities. This resonates with me so much, and not part of the job that is the job. And I want to know, do you want to add anything to that? And then John, I want your response.
Yeah, I think we're about 6 years into our journey here, and we've rolled out a lot of tools. And did we do a lot of culture building and change management? That remains to be seen. It's really up to the different site directors. We have 4 sites, and that's what we're really struggling with. I think a lot of people think the lean team comes in and helps them fix things and improves things. And we really want to shift that from, we'll teach you how to do that. And then the operations managers, supervisors, the team leads on the floor are the ones that can actually do the work without our support all the time. And I've always seen the graphics of that wedge that, the lean is shoved into the wedge of your daily job when it should be part of the wedge of your holistic job. So, we're trying to shift that culture. We're taking a look at that in the end of this year and starting into next year, even though we've been many years into our journey, but we have turnover and new leadership come in. So we're trying to take a look at how we embed that in the culture and have it part of their daily job.
John, can you help Dan with that? Do you have any words of wisdom?
Well, I think safety and housekeeping are too easy to understand. You don't have to do any design of experiments or statistical tools to start with that. I mean, when you check into a hotel room and there's junk on the floor and the bathroom isn't completely clean, and do you want to really sleep in the bed? Whereas if you go to a high-class place where they focus on housekeeping and they train the people and that's part of their reward and recognition system, in customer service, when I ran a customer service organization, we had a course called Customer Service is not a department, it's you. So how do you take a negative situation and teach people to turn it around and stay with, I don't care if you're on the phone for 45 minutes, don't worry about your talk time and all that. Take care of the customer's problem. So we went from worrying about speed to worrying about satisfying the customer. In fact, the call quality rating dismissed process and emphasized courtesy and professionalism. So you might go into the wrong screen and get a ding, but you did such a good job of talking with that customer. So we heavily weighted the courtesy and professionalism part. So the momentum in the call center was when our customer satisfaction feedback started to really improve, we went and took everybody out to lunch. No big deal, not a lot of money, although I had to sneak it out of my budget. $500 for pizza is a lot of money to sneak by the finance guys, but that's what we did. So that's an example in a customer service environment.
Dan, does that help?
I think it's a shift. I've had discussions with others in other webinars. It's very similar that leadership has to set the example of people coming in and make it part of day one and not something that, I'm going to learn about months or years down the road. And some companies, we think them as role models. They weren't always at that place when they started. So having that continuous reinforcement, I think, is important.
And by the way, so I was part of that service organization that John was talking about, not the call center piece, but I was in our repair center, and we had Post-it notes, and they said something along the lines of what John just said. He actually kind of reminded me. It's like service is, I can't remember, but it said it on the Post-it notes, right? And it was sort of that daily reminder. I think one of the things I want to make sure I highlight from what John's saying is, it's not it's not just about doing a bunch of projects and doing waste walks and Gemba walks. It's about getting it into the vernacular and getting leaders to repeat it and putting things out there. I was just talking with someone at a company recently, and they were talking about how they put some metrics and some other things at the front where the employees walk in every day, so that it's the first thing that they see, to keep it top of mind. It's hard to measure the impact of something like that, but personally, I can tell you it impacted me early in my career. And so I think you have to think about some of that promotional type stuff, Dan, when you look at your journey. Cool. Okay. I want to jump to this other one. Is performance improvements, sorry. Do your metrics drive alignment across operations and administration? And I'm going to go to Emily. And Emily, you said, I don't feel that everyone has come to agreement on what are the critical metrics that matter to us as an organization. But even if we had, we still don't have a systematic way to capture that data across all team departments. We lack the structure to truly see if we're winning or not. Emily, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I would clarify that, like, at an organizational level, obviously we're measuring things like ROA, we have an efficiency ratio, like we're doing those things. But when we talk about process, we're not measuring like time and process. We're not measuring defects. We're not measuring those things, so that when we go to talk about process and improve, we kind of guesstimate where we're at and we guesstimate what improvement we're going to get, but then we don't have a system to prove out that we improved anything because we're not measuring. So just some
You're
clarity
not
there.
measuring leading indicators is actually what I just heard you say. You're getting
Right.
lagging. You're getting lagging whether or not your
Correct.
impact or you just got lucky. You're not sure because you don't have the leading indicators.
Right.
Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
John, what are your words of wisdom for Emily?
Well, what Motorola eventually set up, they something called an up chart. It was either 2 charts or 4 charts on an 8.5 by 11 page, and the top left one would always be volume. Could be line items shipped from the warehouse or orders shipped from the warehouse. For the call center, it was call volume. And then the second chart was a service level. So for non-factory things, you were looking at, I can remember we had a goal, same day ship, and it started at 2:00 and then they moved it up to 4. And the goal was 95% of our orders that come in by 4:00 Central Standard Time will ship that day. So they had a service level chart and a volume, and they kept making improvements in the receiving, put away, picking, packing, shipping processes with various tools. They had a lot of mistakes, so they went to a barcoding light pick to light system, dramatically reduced defects and took cycle time. So their chart showed percentage of orders, and when they first said 95%, everybody said that's impossible. They were in the 80s, and they worked with IT and they worked with their logistics that in about a year's time they got to that 93, 94%, and from then on they made small incremental improvements and did it. So volume, service level, in the call center, it could be percentage of calls answered in 20 seconds or less. Or it could be, in our case, it was 15 seconds, which is, so you got to really be on top of your scheduling. What's your call volume peak? How do you staff up at the peak? How do you handle lunches and breaks? How do you coordinate vacations and holidays? All of that stuff became part of the process that we had to manage. You just couldn't say, well, there's a holiday on Monday, and we got 10 people on vacation and wonder why your service level tanked. So all of the resources around the service level had to be managed, where prior to that it was do our best guess, as an example. And then the lower one, left and right, could be defects or complaints or calls, irate calls. We used to have a call monitoring system where you recorded calls, and eventually they automated it, where if the word "you guys are idiots" or "we hate your company" came out, it would flag that call. I don't know if there's any call center people out there, but and then some kind of a customer feedback. So it could be complaints or returns or cases. Some companies use a case creation system. And in fact, we even talk to salespeople and say, hey, what are you hearing out there? What's going on? And we'd get verbatim comments. And they'd say, well, hey, we love your product, but we don't like your online pricing, or we don't like this, or we don't like that. So those would be kind of a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
So Emily, let's have a little fun and put you on the spot. If you think about maybe something that you would like to see change, what would be is there one leading indicator that you feel like you could introduce into the company to start to create that change?
Before I answer that, I'm going to ask a question. So John, as you were talking there, like those things are very specific to those teams, right? Those service levels are different to whichever team you're looking at. Exactly. I think one of the problems that I'm having is pulling out of those teams what their most important measurement is. So if we're talking about service levels, what is it that they really care about the most to then start chasing? Because you could do a million different things when it comes to service levels, right? It could be, again, time to pick up a call. It could be percentage of customer satisfaction. Like there's a million ways you could do it. So I think one of my questions is, how do you pull that out of like, what is the metric that really matters to you and your team so that we can then measure that thing? I think that's where I struggle the most.
Yeah, we got a lot of feedback from other organizations outside of Motorola that were, quote, experts at that. So, for example, in the call center space, there's a company called COPC who does training and has a standard on how you maximize and how you put up a system for a call center or a customer service environment. And that could be an internal one where it's part of your company, or it could be one that you outsource to. A lot of companies, when you call them, you're not calling them, you're calling a third party. So they have a lot of recommendations. On the warehousing side, our Motorola kind of standardized on line shipped or order shipped. The problem is we were in the parts division, and we were doing 1,800 orders a day because people were buying replacement parts and cables and that, where a base station factory is putting out 5 a day or 3 a day. And they sometimes go through a whole system integration process where they have all the radios and antennas connected up before they ship it. It could be a month. So you're right. It varies by volume and operational type, and you just have to find someone in your space, benchmark, and find out what works. So, but typically a volume and some kind of did you meet your commitment measurement? And then some kind of quality or customer complaint feedback. Most companies get complaints. I don't know if they go through your call center or if you document them at all, but we used to have a complaint tracking system and we could look at them by type.
Mm-hmm.
Yost, you got your hand up. Did you want to add something there? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, I hear what Emily is explaining and what John is talking about, and but I miss one perspective though, and I think what you explain is correct. Yeah, you are talking to the teams because they are the experts on the topic. But what I miss is, how do I link this to the way the company wants to position itself in front of the customer? And I think there you maybe should talk to other people than the teams itself, but rather say, okay, so if maybe in the marketing area or so how are we positioning? What is the strategic direction that we want to take? What is our value proposition and so? And then somehow derive a metric that somehow relates to that. And then you probably want to find a sort of a golden middle way between the two elements. But I think it's not, the story is not complete if you only focus on what the team has to tell you.
And I'll just add into this that, you know, there's not a set answer, Emily. I think it's a process. John gave you the part of the process that is benchmarking, seeing if you can find like processes and compare them to yourself. And there's a lot of associations out there that will provide benchmark data on like companies and things like that. And then I think Yost is giving you another part of the process, which is, well, you first start with voice of the customer. You know, what's the output and how do you measure the output against the customer requirements, which frankly is classic Six Sigma. Like that's my spec. The customer requirement is my spec. The output, right, needs to conform to that spec. Now, maybe the last piece I'll add in that is, I see that question that I asked you as an iterative trial and error, right? Mm-hmm. You need to take the process that we're talking about here and then try something. And it may not, you may find a lot of different kind of challenges with it. It's hard to get the data. We don't trust the data. It's not frequent enough, right? Okay, you might have to try some different things in order to get the leading indicator. But the point is that it's useful learning, because once you have that leading indicator, it leads to the stuff that John was talking about. People going, oh, God, we'll never get better than 80%. Well, yeah, but if you fix these 4 things, you can get to 80%, right? And if we can measure those 4 things and start seeing that they go away, you know, we start getting there. And that's the power of getting to those leading indicators.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Matt, there's a couple easy ways to get voice of the customer. So we implemented something at Motorola where we took the top senior leaders and paired them with a salesperson and sometimes me. And Motorola had 900 reseller dealers, the dealer network for the lower tier radios that you see in restaurants and in, you know, garbage companies and that kind of stuff, not the police, public safety, encrypted stuff, but the run-of-the-mill stuff. And we'd go out and I develop some open-ended questions, 5 or 6 of them, that they could go out and sit down with the owner or the manager or the top 2 or 3 people at that dealership. A dealership typically has 5 to 30 employees unless they're at multiple sites. And one question would be, what do you think we're doing well? And some probes could be when you call us, when you email us, when you fax us, when you go on our online. What do you think we're not doing well and need to improve? And there, you could have some probes. And another good question is, of your other suppliers that you buy from or our competitors, what do they do so much better than we do? And after about 10 visits, you start to see, oh, geez, we thought we were doing everything great here, but they're not complaining about that. They don't like our website or they don't like our whatever. And all of a sudden you say, well, now our quality program, our roadmap has to fix this because the customer's saying you're great at these 5 things, but you stink at this. So within you have to pay for the flights and you have to pay for the hotels and there's some expense to it, but it's much better meeting face to face with a customer than it is doing a phone call.
I think it also breaks the groupthink somehow, John.
Yeah, when you come back with a document that Joe over there at Seattle Com says we really suck at this. It's hard for the management of whatever to say, oh well, like who cares? That's just a customer. What do they know?
Yeah, no, right. All right. We are over time by a little bit. Are there any last questions for John before we wrap up? Okay, John, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming in and giving a little bit of the background. That's what I was really wanting you all to hear, some of the background, where these things came from. And frankly, you know, I think John said it. A lot of it still exists today, so we're still fighting the same battles that we were in the 1980s, folks. I do think we've learned of quite a few things, but I think there's still a mindset shift that we're trying to create in most of our companies. So keep at it is my advice. Enjoy the holidays, enjoy the new year, and I look forward to seeing you all in January.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.